Asia School of Business to contribute in this way, helping them identify projects that they could do, and also providing them with support and coaching. It was a perfect opportunity for me to realize my life's purpose, or one of my life's purposes. And I'm very pleased to be here. And in addition to that, I guess it might be worthwhile mentioning, seeing as we're talking about resilience, I'm also a wife and a mom of 2 children. I have been on a career break. So I was on a career break for a few years where I did a lot of different projects and activities, and re-entered the workforce by joining Asia School of Business about 14 months ago. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sangeeta. And myself, I think my name is Michelle Sagan, and very much like you, I've also had quite a switch in careers, taken some time off in the middle as well, in the mid-career break. So I came from investment banking and then moved towards leadership and human capital consulting. And before I then pivoted again and am now head of coaching and counseling at the Asia School of Business. And I think over the years, what I have learned is that despite the many times that you have to pivot in your career and your life, resilience is the one thing that will get you through, and holding on to that and building that as a muscle actually that you can work and practice is really, really key. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today, including the speakers. So let's kick it off with just the idea of resilience to start with. So, Zhariff, in your opinion, what is resilience? I mean, for so many people, resilience could be so many different types of things, right? So for some, it could just be pushing on, pushing harder despite, the challenges around you, despite everything that the world throws at you. And for others, resilience could be actually taking the time of taking that break, that's giving yourself that space to rest, recuperate, rejuvenate in the process of moving forward, right? So for some, it's running that marathon, and rather than a sprint and taking breaks in between. In some, it's just that continuous pushing. And I've heard this response many times. In your opinion, Zhariff, what is resilience?
Thanks, Michelle, for that really great introduction and question as well. I think I can connect very much on what you said about trying different things in your lifetime as well. I think resilience means, because the lifetime is a long time, I think, if you think about it. And likewise, paradoxically, it's a short time, right? It's a blink of an eye. We wake up and one day we die, right? But ultimately, what we want in life, I think the common thing among all of us, whether east or west or wherever, right, is to live a good life and ultimately live a purposeful life, right? So for me, I guess what resilience has meant essentially, growing up without arms was a major thing, but I didn't want it to be a defining thing in my life. It's hard to kind of like not be the guy without arms in that sense, because even that's how I have to remind, like when I give a call to someone, it's like, hey, it's Zhariff who, and it's like, remember the dude without arms, right? But I guess beyond just letting conditions and situations define our lives, right? It's about finding ways to live the best life that you can with what you have, of course, and kind of like where you are, because you can't choose where you're born, I think, and you can't really choose where you die. I guess unless you are suicidal, I guess, in that sense, right? But I think resilience really is that ability to grow and develop the best that you can through all the challenges and hardships that you're going to face. Because in life, one thing for sure that I've um, realized most prominently is that we have a lot of success and growth and accomplishments, and that's amazing as far as mankind is, right? We have the ability to grow and create and develop, right, and achieve. But likewise, we also are susceptible to pain and suffering and failure, and also death and disappointment, and all that is you can't help that to happen actually. And resilience is about that. It's also about kind of managing those situations in life where it's hard, because for me, growing up with our arms, you have people's perspective and perception on what they think you can't or can't do, and that of course creates stigma, and so that also, of course, in a way, I guess, has influenced how people behave to you, and the choices people make, the rejections that I've had in life, obviously, right? And but resilience helps you go through those things, right? Resilience helps you go through the rejections. Out of 10, 20, 30 great projects that I've done in my lifetime, where I've achieved thousands of like social impact to thousands of people, I also have other tens or more projects and programs and ideas that just don't work out, right? And likewise, same thing in career as well, like where I've been blessed in working a lot of dream jobs that I've had, working with the UN and working with Mercy Malaysia, working just in different organizations, and even being a CEO and CMO, and having a really great career. But um even with all that, I've also had the other tons of times, right, that I got rejected along the way to get there, right? And so I think that's what resilience essentially means that you're going to face the hard times, right? Either through the cards that you're dealt with, the fact that your situation, your physical condition, your economical condition, your gender, your religion, right? It can be a lot of cards that you're dealt with in life, right? And sometimes it works well for you, and sometimes it doesn't, for whatever reason, right? And so the resilience is that it's kind of going through those times when, because it's not all rosy and easy in life as well. That's one thing. Even the most I've seen with my own eyes and experience and heard as well, like even with material luxury, where you think you see people with like the most money and like they're super rich, right? And they look like super happy, but in many cases it's also not exactly the situation at all. They might have a lot of money, but they can't really like have people like true friendships, or medical situations, right? Or like mental situations or emotional situations. Like you can have $1 billion in your bank account but not sleep well. Imagine that, like never sleeping well but having a big fat account, right? I don't know whether I could live with that, because that feeling of like not never enough as well, right? So resilience helps you go through those things, right? And kind of like puts it in perspective, puts it gives you those other tools as well, meaning that there's patience as well, right? With resilience comes mindfulness and thoughtfulness as well, with resilience as well. And so resilience is an extremely important thing, and I'm very happy and glad that it's become a theme today as well. So thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Zhariff. That was really a lot to unpack, in so many ways. I think there's so many beautiful nuggets in there that you shared. I think the one that struck out to me the most was the fact that you said that, life will be difficult, it will be hard, and there'll be all kinds of things thrown at you, right? And for me, especially as I'm a coach and a counselor, I think, one of the important things that we take away from that is not to then look at the challenges that we face as failure but instead to reframe it a lot and to take it as learning. And I think that and as we go through this journey, as you mentioned as well, right, and life, like we said, is a marathon. Every time we fall, right, to be able to pick ourselves up, reframe that as an opportunity to learn and then to move forward, for me is very much resilience too. And so, yeah, I really resonate with a lot of what you said. So thank you very, very much for that. And Sangeeta, can we move on to you? What is resilience to you?
Thanks, Michelle. I think Zhariff has said so many things so beautifully. If I look at it from a different perspective, I think there are days when one feels like one is thriving, and there are other days when one feels like one's surviving. And I think for me, the definition of resilience is those days that we feel like we're merely surviving, that we keep going on, and we wake up to another new day, ready to fight the battles, or ready to embrace the challenges of the next day. And I think going back to the point you said, I don't think anybody has a life which is a bed full of roses. There are many days which we have to survive. And I believe if we do that in a conscious way, where we're aware that, okay, today I'm a little bit on survival mode, I'm not feeling the greatest. I think if we learn to reflect and sort of do a temperature gauge or almost every day that we're feeling that, and we find ways that can help uplift us if that's what we need, or we find ways that can dig a bit deeper if it's something deep inside that's causing that feeling. I think it's about developing that muscle, as you said. So if we continually do this, we can become a little bit quicker and a little bit faster at understanding what it is that brings us back to a level at which we can operate. Because I know there's one definition of resilience, which is around the ability to bounce back quickly. But how do you bounce back quickly? Like that's the difficult bit, right? Everybody hopefully eventually bounces back. But I think it's the quickly bit that when we refer to resilience, I think it's the quickly that's emphasized. So I think the quickly for me is what I'm trying to say comes from a practice of being self-aware, reflecting, and just taking that time to think of what is it that I need to get through this day, to get through to tomorrow. And it could even be broken down as what do I need to get through to the next hour or the next half day, and building that muscle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I so agree with the bouncing back quickly, right? In my terminology, I would call that falling forwards, right? But the falling forwards doesn't actually capture the quickly bit, right? So, and I think in the being able to do that in a manner that doesn't allow yourself to struggle too long and get to the point where you get too depressed to bounce back is really, really key, right? And like, I mentioned before, I found that for me, being able to reframe my thoughts, not allowing the negative thoughts to dwell, not allowing the pessimism to remain with me has been super, super key. And I also want to pick up on that topic, on that idea of surviving and thriving that you mentioned. And I think it's so important during uncertain times, particularly because in the last 2 years, what a lot of research has shown us is that we may not be, there'll be days when, we'll still feel good. There'll be days when we still feel really, really awful. But there's also this middle space, right, between thriving and surviving that's called languishing. Right, where we just languish, where we're not mentally depressed or anxious, but where it's a place where we've also lost that oomph for life, right? And I think resilience, we tend to be able to give ourselves a pep talk and pick ourselves up very well on the days maybe when we are surviving, because we know we're really down, right? So we say, you need to get back up, right? You've lost a job, you've gone through that breakup, or you had that divorce, you've lost a family member, and you know that there's a point where you need to bounce back. But sometimes the times when it's most difficult to create this motivation to bounce back is when you're just languishing, when you're just lying in bed and thinking, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to get up today and face the world again? And sometimes those are the times when it's hardest to pick yourself up. So I think COVID has caused a lot of that in us, working from home, Zoom fatigue. It's been tough. There have been so many new challenges that we've had to face in the last 2 years. So I'd like to pose to both of you, Zhariff and Sangeeta, how do you think resilience has changed for us, considering what we've been through in the last 2 years? Shall we start with you, Sangeeta?
Yeah, sure. I think for a lot of people, I can only speak from my own perspective. I think that whole definition of resilience has really, I feel like saying exploded, but I don't know if that's the right word. So I think with the pandemic, we've had so many multiple uncertainties and factors thrown at us, that it's really shaken us off course. For myself as a parent with 2 kids that had to, go into online learning, and with myself working, and I also had a period where I wasn't working, and that wasn't out of choice. So sort of dealing with all that. I also, have my father-in-law staying with us, so kind of managing some routine aspects for somebody who's in a very different stage of life, and just simple things like going back to organizing 3 meals a day, for example, which seems really simple, but when you've got to do it day in, day out, and you don't know how long this phase is gonna last, that's the whole uncertain bit. I think that's really unsettling. And I think, it's been a good 1.5 years now for us that are living in Malaysia. And at the outset, we really didn't know. And I know many people started out feeling like we can do this, and you know, and that's great. But I think there was a sense as we moved along that this was potentially going to be a bit of a marathon. It wasn't just a month or two or three. It could be, you know, up to a year. And I think as we turned that corner of the year, those of us who live in these parts of the world saw other parts of the world opening up. And I think that felt really, really difficult because we could see our friends, our families, our peers, you know, going back to a more normal life that we were used to pre-pandemic. And I think that then, for myself, I had to somehow find in myself, and I didn't do this I wasn't very good at it. I had to find in myself at extra, dig deep inside and understand, you know, deal with that sense of possibly injustice, or deal with that sense of, you know, when can we get back? And that added to another level of anxiety, because it meant, for example, our kids until recently couldn't go back to school so much later than kids, you know, kids in other areas. So I think in terms of going back to your question about resilience, it's been an unprecedented time for us to have developed our resilience. I'm not at all going to try and compare this to you know, our previous generations, especially in the Western world, or even in Asia, who've been part of world wars or you know, independence movements, and how life was really tough. But I think for people in our times who've been fortunate enough not to experience wars or persecution, etc., I think this is you know, this is our real test by fire in a way. And I think on those really, really bad days, it's very difficult to remember that. But on days where it's looking a little bit more optimistic, I feel I've been able to draw some strength from stories who've, you know, from stories of people who've been through really difficult times in those sorts of earlier historical episodes that I mentioned.
Yes, and you know, I know what you mean about, you know, just not knowing when it's going to end, right? And one of the things that you know, has also shown us when we've been languishing and in this space, right, with so much uncertainties, the fact that we've all been suffering from something that we call anticipatory grief as well, right? Because we're grieving all the things that we had anticipated would happen, you know, that trip overseas, you know, seeing our children graduate, or that wedding we've planned, and so many things have been canceled and changed, and a lot of times so we're grieving for that, and the thing is, we don't know when it will end, right? And it kept going on, and like you said, it's been 1.5, almost 2 years now, and where is the end, right? But luckily for us, we know we're in a much better space now, with so many of us vaccinated, Malaysia doing so well with our vaccination program, that we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? So this anticipatory grief, I think, you know, we've moved from that denial stage, that anger stage about what's happening, that unfairness, why is this happening to us in the first place, towards acceptance. So but resilience, I think, is the one thing that has pulled us through this really tough time of uncertainty. And now I'd love to hear from you, Zhariff. How do you think resilience has mattered or played so much of a role in the last 1.5 years in particular?
Yeah, I think we can all resonate to what Sangeeta was sharing in terms of the uncertainty. But likewise, I think a couple of things I think I've learned throughout the years, the couple of years specifically. First things first, it's also like amazing how much we've grown in terms of technology, in terms of what we can do, in terms of how much we can connect and continue to learn and continue to work, despite being isolated or restricted. But I think the other thing that's also obvious was how important it also is to have human social interaction as well. I think we've all been connected for so much, even prior to before COVID. I think we were already on a digital pandemic already. But then, of course, when the COVID happened, we were all connected, like in every way possible via online, right? Like that was pretty much defined how we moved and we communicated. But it also showed how much we longed as well, and how much important it is for us to socially interact. So those were two very interesting things that I observed, I think. And so it can be seen in two ways, right? I mean, you can see it negatively, where how awful it was as well, but likewise also how interesting it is as well, in terms of like, no matter how uh, advanced we are technologically, no matter how much we can utilize our cell phones for almost every other thing, um, there is a limit to what that world can bring, and there is still the beauty of physical life, right? And because I say this, maybe because I was still connected to the analog world back in the 80s, and now, of course, being in the last 10 years specifically, and I'm not an old guy, of course, I'm only at 40 this year, and so but yeah, that's quite an interesting observation that I made. And how it connects back to resilience, I think, is also, like, I guess, it's a point to ponder as well, in that sense, right? How much digital consumption do we need, and how much physical, emotional, spiritual consumption do we need then as well? Because those two things are very different dimensions of things, right? One is very much consuming in terms of economics and commerce and wealth, in that sense, and another one is more on giving and also receiving, right, in a different way. I mean, so I like that, in that observation. I think it's also given me personally the opportunity to see how we are as a species, and also as a being as well, right? um I think another thing that was also interesting is like how you were saying the uncertainty of suffering as well. And that's the thing about suffering also, I've observed, right? We've had so many years of good times in Malaysia, like, like, of course, the world wise, we've got, a bigger context of how history has unfolded, but in Malaysia it's been good, actually, but this has been a big test for us. And I'm kind of like, you can really see how humanity is, and where our society is. On one hand, we're amazing as well, and we have so much to work on as well. And to me, these are all opportunities, and resilience really gives you that opportunity, and that ability, hopefully, because the other side of resilience, of course, is just giving up, right? And kind of like letting things crumble. And that's something that I hope for nobody to ever get. But unfortunately, so many of us succumb to to the failures and to the suffering. But resilience has enabled us as well through many ways. But yeah, as I said, I mean, this might sound a little bit confusing, but as I said, I think the interesting bit is there's two ends, right? We're so, our ability to communicate digitally has enhanced so much, but at the same time, I do feel that there is more validity now to be able to, like, not forget about human interaction, not forgetting to kind of like hug your loved ones, right? Not forgetting to like keep in touch with them, because as much as you can do it on Zoom, nothing feels like a proper hug from your mom or your dad or your daughter or your son or your best mate, all right? So yeah, that's kind of like where I've seen things, and hopefully we can also learn. Environment is another thing, that's another kind of worms I might open up later on as well, but I really hope we've learned as well, in terms of to appreciate the good, like, air, right? I was in Kapas Island for the last 10 days. I just got back a couple of days ago, and coincidentally, I also spent a good 6 months on the same island last year throughout lockdown, and it was just amazing to see how nature has rehabilitated as well. And whether or not we've learned to appreciate these things is a question which I hope that I can pose for us as well, and for us to ponder as well.
Thank you
Michelle,
so much. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sangeeta.
I just wanted to add one point actually. When Zhariff was speaking earlier, he alluded to several points where he had made several observations, and it's interesting because the ability, according to Brené Brown, very famous researcher in the US, who's also a speaker, TED speaker, written many, many books. According to her, one of the key attributes for people to develop resilience is actually the ability to be very curious about themselves. So I think if nothing else, just the ability to just become more curious about ourselves, how we operate, why we operate in the way that we do, and maybe even curiosity about society in general. I think that's a first step that absolutely anyone can take. to develop resilience. I just wanted to point that out because I think Zhariff, kind of exemplified that.
Yeah, exactly. Remaining curious, over the many, many years, right, throughout and all the challenges that he's had to face, right, despite all the rejections that he's had, still keeping up that curiosity for life and not letting it get him down. Absolutely. I find that very inspiring. And very.
Sangeeta, just Michelle, if you don't mind me adding as well to what Sangeeta was saying, another interesting observation that I made as well is how much more aware people are to their inner self and to spirituality and to personal development and to mental health. And of course, this is because we've all just had that sitting down, right? I mean, we couldn't do anything else. And so we had to learn and observe and be a little bit more aware, and so that's in a way a good thing as well. That little ability, I guess, that break enabled us to give that time off for our minds to kind of like introspectively explore, because we couldn't retrospectively go out to do things, and so we were forced to stay home, right? And I believe that there was a big sense of like a lot of people couldn't explore outside, and so you can see, like, what's trending out there, meditation and hashtag and all these kind of things, videos, all these the kind of things I think are the positives that you can take out from what has happened in the last couple of years.
Thank you. Yeah, I absolutely agree, and that's why I brought my dinosaur here with me. I don't know if you can see him, but yeah. So I absolutely agree. I feel it's you're all tying the points together so beautifully in the sense that if COVID is the meteor that hit the world, right? And we are the dinosaurs, we need to evolve, right? And as you mentioned, Zhariff, evolving as humanity as part of the human race, right? As in humanity, as humanity is so important. And being able to see the good, right? In all of it, to take away the positives. Is really, really crucial. One of my favorite sayings is, now that my barn has burned down, I am able to see the moon, right? And we've lived so long in this barn, right? Where we've had to, the focus has been so much on maybe, a lot of collection of material wealth, on work, on success defined by a lot of outwardly material things, right? But I think if COVID has taught us anything, it's taught us that money can't, even if you're rich or you're poor, you're still susceptible to the disease, right? And you're still able to get sick. The disease doesn't look at whether you have money in the bank or not, right? And so it also creates, I think, a lot of empathy in the human race, that we're all the same. We can all suffer in the same way. We all face with the same kind of challenges in life. Where we all went through the same thing. We were all quarantined together. And introspectively, like you said, I've done so much coaching with so many people in that time who've also taken that opportunity to find meaning in the life that the life that they're leading now, right? The fact that they're not working 16, 18-hour weeks, hours a day, mean that they have enough time to actually go home, be with your family, hold them, rebuild relationships that they had the time to cultivate with their children, even schooling from home, working with them, helping them with their homeworks, that ability as well to connect with yourself, because the world isn't so busy anymore around you, and to connect with your inner self and find meaning and purpose in everything that's happening, so that, who are you going to be after the pandemic, right? Are you going to be the same person who went into it? Hopefully not. Hopefully the pandemic would have taught us something, right? And I think the other thing I'm so excited about this, because I love this topic, because one of the other things I do is I also consult and coach with corporates, and one thing that I've noticed in a lot of corporations is that if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's also taught corporates not to treat the people as cogs in wheels anymore, right? But to bring back that human touch, that human leadership, humanity to the workplace. To bring compassion back to the workplace, to understand that loyalty is key, because when they're working from home, you can no longer micromanage them. And if you can't micromanage them, what do you need? You need to build relationships, you need to build trust. And all this comes from the fact that we've had to live a life so different than in this new normal than we had to before, right? And I think that's really important. that we actually look for these positives, and actually seen how we have evolved, as the human species in the last 1.5 years. I'd like to move on to a next question now. And that is actually, how do you then build these skills? How do you then build resilience? I mean, are there any thoughts, habits? What can you do on a daily basis? Like, right, if it's a muscle, that you can work to actually develop it further. Who'd like to go first?
Yeah, I could take that. Like you said, like a muscle, right? I think for me, I've had a lifetime of learning things. Like even it's not just about academic time. I think you've got that whole systematic academic method of learning, of course, and you've got life as well. And so that's where I guess in life it depends on how much choices you've made to do things and how much choices you've made to not try things. And so for me, I guess, like you, as you learn as a child, I think one of the most interesting things I remember was the ability to imagine. I think was a very important thing, that ability to have imagination, right? Because it enables us to learn as well. And so as a child, for instance, I used to imagine, all sorts of things, right? Whether I was like on a mission or on a ninja mission or on a training like boot camp, right? And thinking all these kind of things, right? But it gave me that skills to be able to then go through life as well, right? And then of course, as you grow up, I think the how can be very complicating, because how does one become a better person, or how do you build that resilience, right? And to me, I think it did come from life, I guess, living, right, learning the different things. And so you have to learn from your failures is important as well. Like Sangeeta was saying earlier, and you as well, Michelle, where we go through our different failures and see how that, what do we take from those failures? Is it something that you regret and like scar you and damage you, and and unfortunately becomes the demise of you, right? Or does it become the thing that is like a muscle? Like you said, the muscles are also damaged each time, like when you go to the gym. And mental ability and emotional ability is also, in a sense, a similar thing. You may not be able to physically see your emotional resilience or abilities, but it comes through life, of course, and how you feel about things, right? And so it's a little bit like, where do you stand in the tipping point of life? Are you kind of more towards the always feeling imbalanced and always feeling miserable, or do you tip more towards, I have better days in my life and I feel more, more days I actually feel appreciative and blessed, right? And so if you assess where that is, right, I think for me, I think one of the key things I've learned, I studied psychology, which was an interesting thing, and I think it was necessary as well for me to try and understand how we operate as human beings on in terms of our mental, cognitive, emotional self, right? It was interesting, it was important. But I also later on found the realms of spirituality and other kind of realms of knowledge as well. And so I realized it's like a whole body when you kind of like take it together. There are things that you can learn from your grandmother, your grandparents, your parents. So many nuggets actually of how you can become a better person and create that resilience. And it's really, I think, important for each person to go through that journey of like just having that conversate with your folks as much as possible. If your grandparents are still alive, and you have that blessing and opportunity, have chats with them as well and learn how they do things as well, because there's a lot of ways that I think the history and heritage as well that is important as well, on top of whatever you learn in science and education and academics as well. So I've kind of like found that balance is a really important thing, and how you achieve that balance is by incorporating, I think, good diet habits. Of course, you need to eat well, right? Good sleeping habits are important as well. You need to rest well as well. and then understanding that you've got a physical self, of course, resting well, eating well, exercising well, right? But also, of course, learning as well. And for me, I pray. I'm Muslim, and so I have my 5 times prayer. It took me a long time to get to this place where I actually do 5 times prayers, because I guess for now I also incorporate other things as well. I meditate as well. I've learned the amazing things from things like Sadhguru and Isha Kriya, these amazing inner engineering tools. I've done qigong as well. I've gone through learning about yoga as well, and different types of yogas. And I think as you kind of like start accumulating those knowledge, right, you start finding themes that are common. And I guess that's where the universal knowledge of like the well-being is, right? You kind of see in science is there, in mindfulness is there, in positive psychology is there, in scriptures is there, in great spiritual practices is there. So I found the how to kind of create that resilience was by digesting all that, learning all those different things, right? And for me, yeah, as I said, I try to make sure I do my prayer. I try to make sure every day I meditate. And some days, of course, you're not, you'd like to be as disciplined as possible, because as hard as it sounds, it is important, because like being in a gym as well, right? You can't just work out once a week and once a month and expect a healthy body as well. And so resilience and mental health, and kind of like the inner self and how you cope with things, is the same thing as well. So if you practice those things, then a lot of other things that you can't control in life, like when people decide that they don't want you, they don't agree with you, right? The economy doesn't agree with you, right? The global, the national politics doesn't agree with you, right? Society might not agree with you. And but despite all that, if you've got these practices, as I said, if you eat well, right, sleep well, take care of all your mental health, and meditate, give that time and space before you kind of like, I think one of the important things I've learned is giving yourself that room before you react. Like you said, bouncing back quickly, but bouncing back quickly also means the ability to give yourself that little room and space before you kind of like jump into conclusions and jump into reactions as well. And that's what I think all those practices like meditation and breathing as well are really great practices that I would encourage highly to everyone to learn. And I think it's in levels and stages. Like I believe I found things that really work for me well, but I would be more careful to kind of say this is what's going to work for you specifically. These are the how, I mean, these are the specific tools. I find that a little bit, like, for now at least, I'm not in a position for me to be there yet. But what I can say, as I said, is explore those different things, and eventually it doesn't matter whether you're a Muslim, whether you're not, whether you're Hindu, or a Christian, or a Buddhist, right, or an atheist, even, for that matter of fact, right? I think it's important to balance also your kind of like, you've got mental health and also your inner health, whether you want to call that spirituality or not. Up to you.
Thank you, Zariff. And for me, I think what really resonated was the fact where you said, there's so many things in life that you just cannot control, right? And so many times when I coach around that area, we always come back to the fact that if you can't control something, then what can you control? And that's only your reaction to it, right? And so how you react to a challenge that's thrown towards you, I think, is the most key, because you can't change the situation or the person or the world, when it's been hit by something like a global pandemic. But what you can change is how you perceive it, right? And the stories that you tell yourself in your head regarding it, right? And whether you treat it as an opportunity to grow, to learn, to challenge yourself, or whether you treat it as just something so devastating that would create in depression or anxiety, really also depends in the words that you say to yourself, at night before you go to bed, in the morning when you wake up, right? And
Actually, when you said stories in your head, that's so
yeah,
true. I think a lot of us live in that story in our head. Really, very much so, I believe, right?
exactly.
And it becomes kind of like your reality. And even more so during the pandemic, when you're stuck and you're not seeing people, and so you're creating more stories in your head as well. And I believe that the how essentially is consolidating what is reality and what is truth, and you interacting with those truths and maintaining your truth as well, because the stories in your head can be imaginary as well. And as I said, an imaginary can be great, but it can also be bad as well. You
Absolutely.
can, a lot of people fall in that well of, like, all sorts of doom, and oh my god, we're all getting COVID, we're all gonna die, we all have to wear a mask, and if not, and 24/7, and we all have to, it becomes the paranoia thing. But I guess we forget that at the end of the day, it's just people get sick. You just got to do what you got to do, right? And you can't live too much with that story in your head. And I think it's important to have the practices that give you and maintain that sense of, like, balance of who you are inside, truthfully, and not just the story that you make.
Exactly, right. And like you said, it's that imagination as well that you need, imagination, the ability to imagine a better future for ourselves, once we get past these challenging times, and not to allow the doom and gloom to bring us down in the process. And Sangeeta, can we ask you, how can you build this muscle of resilience, thoughts, habits that you can put in place on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And I think, in fact, the pandemic has been, one of the silver linings, I guess, of the pandemic has been that it's been an opportunity for us to take that time to reflect and reset. And I think a lot of what a lot of people have done and attempted to do is to sort of look at some of the habits that we have and where they come from. Some of the good ones that we want to maintain, but equally some of the ones that we're not so proud of and want to deconstruct. And I think a lot of this comes down to a practice, and Zhariff has mentioned everything, but a practice of reflection. It could be, last thing at night, first thing in the morning, or any time of the day, really. Just a consistent practice to understand what it is that is not which aspects of your life are you dissatisfied about at present, or what's not resonating, or what's causing you anxiety. So I think to take time to think about those type of things, and also to understand, which items of those can we do something about, can we influence, and what can we not. I think the pandemic, if nothing else, has taught us that so many things are beyond our control. And like you said, the only thing that we are truly in control of is the way in which we choose to respond to a certain situation. And I think just that realization that we have a choice in how we respond to every single scenario, when you really think about what that means, it means you have a plethora of ways that you can respond to one action, react one stimulus. And that is, when you really for me, when you really think about it, it is so empowering. The flip side, of course, is that we always go into what we at ASB called fast thinking. We always go into habits, right? So we don't remember to practice it. But this is one of the things that I've learned at ASB, and we're trying to practice it all over ASB, is we're trying to find those opportunities to just take stock of the situation. So pause and reflect and think and plan about, hey, next time I'm in this situation, what can I do differently? What are my options, and how would I like to do it? And then, give ourselves the opportunities to try those out, and not beat ourselves up when it doesn't go to plan, because it likely won't, right? When you're trying something out of your comfort zone for the first time and doing something differently, it's unlikely that you're gonna reach the exact point that you want to be. So I think it's important to practice it a few times, right? Ask for support. Let people know that, hey, I'm doing something differently. I'm trying this new habit out. I'm trying to reframe. So one of the great things that I've learned through the pandemic is the ability to reframe. I'm trying this reframing thing out, right? So this is what I would normally have said, and this is how I'm trying to see it. So let people in a little bit, share. I think these things are really important. Have worked for me. I think another thing is also the bouncing back bit, right? I think why it's really important to delve deep inside is because when you bounce back, you want it to be authentic. You want it to be in your own time, and you want to make sure you have dealt with what you've needed to deal with. I think very often many of us feel the pressure to bounce back, but we may not have resolved some underlying things, right, that are there. So I think that authentic bouncing back is really key. If I may take the opportunity just to share a couple of things that have helped me. I am a person who reacts quite a lot to stimulus, and I found that it was getting overwhelming with the pandemic and all the things I had to, manage in the house. It was just overwhelming beyond, unprecedented sort of levels. And for me, what was really important was to understand my boundaries. So what is it that I'm comfortable with? How can I recognize when I'm reaching that level of overwhelm? Like, can I recognize it in myself? And then also the other thing is, what are the things that empty my cup and what are the things that fill my cup? And I remember, I think it was the third month of the pandemic, I sat down because it was already reaching overwhelming levels. I sat down and wrote a list of activities that I could do that would fill my cup. And I called it what brings me joy. And I divided it up into activities that took 30 minutes or took 2 minutes. So things I could do in 2 minutes are the ones that I've actually been practicing. And believe it or not, the things that take 30 minutes, I've not, because to find that 30 minutes when you've got like 6 people in your house is very difficult, right? So I'm just going to share a couple of those things that I can do in 2 minutes. One is, and this is what works for me. And I'd like to point out everybody's different. So everybody, we should all find what works for us. But what couple of things that have worked for me is, I absolutely have discovered a renewed interest in houseplants. And I have houseplants all around my office space, both at home and at work. And I just literally, if I'm zoomed out in a meeting or over zoomed or even in between meetings, I will just take time out and just tend to my plants. I will water them. I'll remove the dead leaves. I'll kind of, provide a bit of air. I'll just do some pottering about with my plants. And it just takes my mind away from whatever it is that's overwhelming me or stressing me out. And that can take as little as 30 seconds, or it can take, 20 minutes or whatever. Another thing that is even faster than that is I am very, very motivated by motivational quotes. And I now have my go-to Pinterest, and whatever it is that I'm feeling, I just find some inspirational quotes about anxiety, about guilt, about success, about failure, right? And I'll just go and find those ones that really inspire me. And then on another day when I have 5 minutes, I'll actually take out one of those quotes that I really loved, and I'll just sit down and write them. And I'll just be really good about the fact that I've used a fancy pen and some nice paper and just written this quote out. So these are very, very basic, simple things that I've done just to give myself a break from the overwhelm. They bring me real joy. I haven't, the love for plants is something that I had developed in my teens, and I'd completely forgotten about it until last year. And suddenly it was this unbridled joy that I could delve into, and I did. And I just found other ways in which I could find pockets of time where I could devote to such activities that just lifted me up. And you won't believe it. Sometimes I was like a person where 10 minutes ago I was in the depths of despair, and then 10 minutes later I was like, oh, I'm so excited and happy about life, and I have the energy now to keep going and keep showing up for those things that I felt I didn't have the energy to show up to.
Oh, thank you for bringing in that wonderful word, energy. For me, I think, building that resilience is managing the 4 areas of energy: your physical energy, your diet, your exercise, keeping healthy, right? Because a lot of if you're not taking care of your health, you're not sleeping well, your resistance will fall. You don't have the mental and emotional energy to pick yourself up if you're not physically at your best, right? That emotional energy, that connection, that ability to really connect with another human being is so very key. Taking the time to be there for others and bringing compassion to the table. I think if you're thinking about other people, it's hard to focus only on yourself. So that's really important. That mental energy, right? I think all of us have been talking so much about that ability to reframe, reset, dig really deep. And of course the spiritual energy, right, to find meaning and purpose in everything that's been happening. And of course at the end of the day, to wrap it all up, to be able to find happiness and moments of joy anytime in the day, right, despite everything that's going on for us. So thank you so much for sharing all of this. Before we end, I'd just like to address one of the questions that has popped up in the Q&A. It's from Tim Ringrose. And the question is, building on the question that has just been asked about changing perspectives towards resilience and resiliency, have we now had to switch to a more long-term perspective, long-term lens? This is a marathon rather than a set of short sprints, and move away from that quick fix and immediate gratification that so many of us were accustomed to pre-COVID. So any thoughts to that, Zhariff and Sangeeta?
Yeah, I'm not too sure what he would mean by quick fixes though, but in that sense, Yes, it's very true. And you got to look at it two ways. I think where, of course, you want to think long term, but you also have to remember that we are living in the now as well, and each breath is valuable. Each kind of like what you're seeing now. So, and also not forgetting what happened in the past, right? So it's all about consolidating that what's going to happen in the future, not being too worried about that. Learning about what happened in the past, and also kind of like appreciating things as they are right now and not forgetting to see what's in front of you. I think I resonated, Sangeeta, what you said just now in terms of like when you bounce back, there's also kind of like you gotta sort your things out as well. There's a lot of things in life that sometimes is solvable immediately, and some things do take time to solve as well. Some things might take a singular person. Sometimes it could take a group effort to fix things as well. And so understanding this, I think it's important, and not rushing to kind of like be out there and committing and trying to be a hero, and trying to fix the world when you yourself are not fixed yet. Also is also important, and an important thing to acknowledge as well, because we all are broken from time to time, or break from time to time for whatever reason. And giving us the time to fix things is important in our lives, and not feeling discouraged if you can't fix something in your life situation right now, because a lot of people feel so discouraged when they've got a situation. It could be a family situation, a financial situation, or any other situation that they can't fix immediately, and they make it define their lives, and they live a depressed life, and it just kind of like spirals downwards if it can't be fixed, right? Or they feel, oh my god, I can't fix it now. But I mean, that's, I think in life it's important for you to fix the things in your life, and then after that you go out there and live more as well. And so that's that balance of acknowledging what's within you and what's around you as
Yeah.
well.
Not
Mm.
living with a victim mentality, really, right? And instead of moving away from that, not letting things define you, and instead fighting back and pulling yourself up again. And maybe I think in terms of Kim's question as well, right? You're so right. In the sense that we're a we're living in a now generation, right? Where we want everything now, instant
Yeah, there's
gratification.
hacks. Everything's a
Yes,
hack, I think, in
everything
that
is
sense.
hacked, right?
But
So we
but
don't
like I
we're
said,
not
yeah.
patient enough.
But what I said earlier, right? Like you got to do some things every day, right? I mean, there are certain things that I've learned that you can't just, it will just fix now, hooray, right? No,
Yeah,
some things that you finally say, for instance, you finally have the mental energy to fix something, but where did that mental energy or emotional energy came from? Is through the things that you've probably had to be doing, whether it's 1 day, 10 days, 30 days, 100 days. I don't know, right? How many days it is for you to find your thing, or to fix your life, or to find your happiness, or to find, I mean, these things are a process, right? But
yeah,
you just have got to grind it every day, and one day you come across something, it's great. One day you come across something, it's painful, right? But then, whether it's a good thing, bad thing, who knows, right? There's like that, there is a saying, in a proverb, good thing, bad thing, who knows. And yeah, and so there's a great story that I used to share as well about that as well. But yeah, I really do believe that at the end of the day, you just kind of like have to take the punches and learn.
yeah. And I think it's about also no sowing your seed and not expecting the tree to fruit right away, right? Just giving it
Mm,
time to bloom as well. And Sangeeta,
correct.
any last words from you before we end our session today?
So I just wanted to actually address, I think Tim was trying to identify what opportunities we believe might be there for companies and individuals working in companies. So I think this it has been a great wake-up call, right? I've worked in corporate for had worked in corporate for almost 2 decades. And this was pre-pandemic. And even then we knew that things had to change. We had to be able to bring our whole selves to the table. We needed more flexible work opportunities. We needed company culture that was a true company culture where we felt we could bring to the table what we wanted to bring to the table. We needed more impact-oriented companies whilst making a profit. All of that is important. And I think this is a great opportunity for all of us. You know, whether you see yourself as a, you know, junior person or organization, or you are indeed C-suite. This is your opportunity to really work from the inside out. And I love this book. It's called Atomic Habits. It talks all about working from the inside out. So where is it that you want to go, and how are we going to get there, and what are you going to do about it? So whether you're a supposedly junior person or whether you're a C-suite, this is really the opportunity for you to innovate within your company. Do a few experiments, pilots, and see what it is that you can do to really shift things. Because I think in our generation, this is the opportunity. There's a great saying, and I'd love to leave with this saying: if not now, when? If not you, who?
Thank you so much, Sangeeta. And with that, we'd like to thank all of you, yes, you, for joining us today. And thank you to our two wonderful speakers, Sangeeta and Zhariff. And we look forward to seeing you again at our next ASB Brown Bag Series workshop. And thank you very much, everybody, and have a wonderful day.
Take care, guys. Have a good one.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You reach out and connect to us if you can. Bye.